Loop, 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 loop. London, 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 London. Hello. Happy Tuesday. You are currently tuned into Bloop Radio London with me, Redfreya, and this is the Urban Soundscapes radio show. I'm really excited for today's show because I've got a great guest with me here in the studio today, James Harcout. If you want to say hi, James.
Hi.
Hello. So if you're tuning in right now, thanks for listening live. If you're listening back, thanks a lot for tuning in. We've got a really interesting and unusual show lined up for you today, slightly different from the usual format, where we're going to be having a bit of a chat and a Q&A about James's journey with production and DJing since the 90s, so really over spanning 2 or 3 decades. Where he is now, and also a range of factors around the music industry today in 2022. What's it like trying to be a producer, be an artist, and find your creative flow amongst all the factors that we face, such as social media, business techno, and the challenges of the DJ lifestyle, such as alcohol, sleep deprivation, drug use, many other topics. So yeah, we're going to be diving into a bunch of different topics. We'll also be hearing some really cool upcoming releases from James as well. So really excited to kick off the show. Thanks so much for being here, James.
No problem. I'm really confused because on that screen there's us, but it must be a few seconds ago or in the future maybe, because we're doing different stuff on that screen that we're doing in here.
I'll let you into a secret. Here in Bloop Radio London, it's space-time travel only in this basement. Here we are in the studio, and we've got the live feed on the corner, and it's like 5 seconds delayed, so it will look like a little bit out of time. Secret time travel, really. That's what's happening. So I really wanted to kick off the show by giving you the opportunity really to talk a little bit about your journey in the music industry, which obviously I read your interview with Balance series. I think, was it last year that came out, a couple of years ago?
Earlier this year, yeah, August.
Because I found your mix from that as well, and I was obsessed with that mix. I was messaging you, asking you for all the track IDs and everything. So yeah, I just wanted to hear about really what got you into dance music in the first place in the 90s, and then maybe if you want to elaborate on that of your journey since then, what's led you to get to now.
Yeah, so I guess it started, I was a punter, a clubber, and in the 90s a lot of it was happening around here, literally in this area, Fabric, Turn Mills, up at King's Cross, and it was more the late 90s. There was a big thing going on in the early 90s, but I was kind of too young at that point. And I didn't really have a concept of what music was my favourite music initially. I was just kind of going out looking for fun, and it was very hedonistic in those days, right? It was extremely hedonistic.
Are we talking about the 90s or early 2000s?
90s, like 96, 97, 98, those years. And then 99, it sort of became a little bit more commercialised, I suppose. But yeah, it was just a really, really good time. But in terms of the journey as a producer, that didn't start till later. So yeah, basically I got fascinated by the music. I went to record shops. I could never find the records that I wanted in the record shops, or they wouldn't give me them, or the stuff there just wasn't the stuff I'd heard the night before.
Okay.
So that is when I first started thinking, well, maybe I need to start trying to make it. So I did dabble in 1999, 2000. And I did actually have a record signed back then. Okay. Because Paul Oakenfold, do you know this guy?
I know Paul Oakenfold, yeah.
At the time,
he's still. I've actually heard that he was the king of everything at that time.
At that time, he was a very, very cool guy. I mean, he still is, but he does a different thing at the minute. But him, Hernan Catania, a young Hernan Catania who just started, he was touring the world with Oakenfold, and he was supporting some of my music. And then I got this 5-record deal with a Canadian label called Release Records, which completely killed me because they were telling me to make you need to make this sort of music, you need to make that sort of music, and that's just the last thing you want to hear. And also, I hadn't really learned, I didn't know what I was doing. I was a clubber, really. I wasn't a professional. So that kind of petered out very quickly. And I was out of the scene.
Flash in the pan.
Flash in the pan, yeah. Then I sort of came back in 2005 with a label, doing vinyl, and I was quite serious, and there were some events and stuff, and, you know, and there was a little resurgence, and the journey was back, and the music was getting better. I still hadn't really learned to produce properly, because that takes years, I think. But then come 2007-8, there was some success. I had a big track on Beatport. Then suddenly started getting bookings, international bookings and stuff, and I just sort of thought, oh, well, I need to take these. There was no strategy. Stuff was just happening to me, you know. There was no strategy. The business techno idea, I could have done with that back then, because then maybe I'd have got somewhere, but I was just kind of bouncing from thing to thing. The thing I loved was the studio. I wasn't doing that as much anymore. So it just fizzled out. It took quite a few years to fizzle out.
Okay, and you felt a bit sort of pulled away as well from the studio. So you're getting off of these bookings that are just coming at you. I guess there's a reasonable sum of money, I guess, tied to the bookings as well.
Not really, no. I mean, to be honest, now I look back and I understand what was going on, because I wasn't checking out the promoters. I wasn't checking out. I kind of had a quote-unquote manager in some other countries who just sort of nominated himself as someone who's going to take control of me. And I didn't really question it or anything. And then in the end, I took a booking. We had no deal, no written arrangement, and the guy was like, you will never play here again because you took a booking not through me. You know, and there were some experiences like that where I was just naive. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no manager. I had the attitude that I don't need to have someone managing, because what does that involve? That's just like answering emails and arranging flights. But it obviously is so much more than that. So yeah, I was just naive and it was like a toddler or something entering into the scene without any kind of guidance or anything. So I had played a few international gigs. Some were really good. There was a Rainbow Serpent Festival appearance, for example. That's a really nice festival.
Where's that based?
Australia, Melbourne.
Wow, okay.
And there was a lot of like weird bookings where someone has just booked you because you've been high up on the Beatport chart once.
Yeah.
And then you turn up somewhere and it's like the vibe and everything. It's like, do you even know what music I produce? They have no idea. And these experiences were horrible, really, because, you know, I'm turning up with a load of music that's completely inappropriate for the night.
Yeah. And we see that magnified times 10 now, because now we see a lot of people being booked just off, say, like their presence online on social media, and obviously some music as well, but we see promoters reaching out to book people just because they're popular and they have a big following and they don't necessarily fit a lineup very well. Like it's definitely less curated these days.
Yeah. And it wasn't curated in some of these ones that I'm talking about as well, but they were in far-flung places, and so I did get to travel a bit. But I was also working full-time the whole time.
Okay.
Right? So at no point did I feel I could, it was reliable enough. I knew that, you know, through the drunken haze, I knew enough that this could just end at any time.
Okay.
And that's the thing, I think, with artists these days. If you're I would say a small artist these days is getting like £1,000, £2,000 a show, and I wasn't even getting that.
Yeah.
It was well below that, right?
Yeah.
And the best I ever got, I think, was £1,500 ever.
Yeah.
And nowadays, there's people taking £30,000. You know, they're taking an entourage of people. With
and table bookings at clubs, and I think we all know how elements of the music industry work, especially the more commercial the dance music is kind of becoming, because it is moving a little bit out of the underground scene that it was always in the past. It is becoming a little bit more mainstream these days.
And back then there was a clear division between mainstream and, you know, what's happened now is that some of the mainstream is actually quite cool. Like some of these people, like some people like Peggy Gill are artistically cool, Dixon and these sorts of people, but they are also business techno people. They're huge people with teams of, you know, not that that's a bad thing, right? But it's just a thing now that you have a social media strategist, you have a team basically around your project. It's a project stroke business, and you have a team and a brand. Whereas back then it's just James Harcout with a bag of CDs and some vinyls and turning up, and there was no branding and there was no management, and really,
And exactly, and now to be successful, you kind of need to do it all. Like, you need to have everything, really. And if you are just an artist, I'm not saying just a pure artist, but if you see yourself more as an artist and you don't also commoditize yourself and see yourself also some way as a sellable, marketable product, then you're going to struggle to be successful. Well, I mean, also that's a whole other question of what does it mean to be successful as an artist? Does it just mean making music that you care about, that some people are moved by? Is that success? Or is success paying all of your bills and touring the world? And that's a whole other question. I
think for a lot of people, success is being like number one. I think for some of those guys, it's being number one. And I, you know, without naming the people, I kind of know a bit about what goes on. There's a lot of not fear. What's the word? It's like just making sure, really like hell bent on securing that position of being in the upper echelons of. There's no taking the foot off the gas kind of thing. Whereas my foot was never even on the gas back then. I was just turning up, hoping for a party where people would appreciate the right music, and feeling very disappointed when I'm turning up to something that's more like Head Candy or something, and I had completely inappropriate music.
Well, I'm really curious about that. So do you feel like, so let's skip forward now, like decade, 2 decades, like that we've talked like 2007, 2008. So when we get ahead to sort of 2017, 2018, did you change your strategy? Did you change it consciously? Do you feel like did you have a bit of a break in between and then kind of come back to this?
It's very kind of you to suggest that I even had a strategy in the first place. There was no strategy at all. I kind of just
there still isn't?
I think what happens is when people get when people's success starts dipping, right? And so as an artist, when I turned up to gigs, unless my best track of the night or some of my favourite tracks of the night are my own, I would feel like a fraud or something. I didn't feel like just turning up and playing other people's records. That was really me. And by the end, that's what I was doing, because I wasn't making music that was good enough, really. I was hardly making any music. And when I was, it felt like I just wasn't enjoying it, wasn't loving it. So I had no strategy. I didn't really know how to get out of that situation. It just felt like I was getting older and my children were getting more needy, and it's just like my focus just was not that. I was not in it, So I just stopped, essentially.
Okay. When was this, sort of?
2015, 16.
Okay. So you just pulled back, kind of pull the plug.
Yeah. I had a label, and I wound that up around about. I mean, I was virtually not doing anything with it. It was dormant in 2016, and I kind of officially. Well, I sort of went back into the studio for a week or something at a time just to play around, but I had no idea. I was not buying music. I wasn't listening to music. I wasn't engaged in the scene. I was barely talking to any other producers or anything. So yeah, I was essentially dormant. I would say 2015, 16. I did play a gig in 17, I think, a couple of them, and I was getting some bookings in Bristol at Lakota, just here and there, but I just wasn't in the game, I was just wasn't. Now I'm in it. I'm producing. I'm thinking about music. I'm loving music. But then I wasn't.
Yeah. Okay.
And it happened in a slow, creeping way.
This is super, super interesting. I think it would be really good at this point, I think, to hear maybe the first track that you've got lined up to play us, and then when we listen to that track, we're going to dive back in and hear about what that major thing that changed for you was. Because obviously, right now, I'm discovering your music. A lot of people who I said when I shared that you're coming on the show today, I got a lot of messages on Instagram, on Facebook. People say, "Oh, I love that guy. I love his tracks." So clearly, something's changed. Something's working now. And I think it would be quite inspiring for people to sort of hear about that.
Yeah.
But let's dive into your first track first of all.
So this is coming out on Friday, and it's the first of 2 remixes of a very talented producer called Matt R. He does sort of electronica break stuff, and he's done an EP for Renaissance. And I did 2 remixes, and they're putting out one with the first 3 tracks on Friday, and then the others the following week. It's called XD, and this is the Sunrise remix.
Great. Hello, we're back.
Hello.
So just take a second to tell us a little bit about that track as well that we've just heard, because you said something about it before, but yeah, let's hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so it's a breaks track, the original version, and Marcus at Renaissance said, "Do you fancy doing a remix?" So that was the first one I did. But then I sort of thought, no, actually, no, that was the second one. The first one I did was the clubbier one, which is, I'll play that one next.
Yeah.
Called Moonrise, and that one was, I called it the Sunrise remix because it's a bit more, it's not such a banging kind of club track, but it took on Matt's melody and sort of just built a track around that, because he had really beautiful kind of shimmering pads in his music, and I kept that in this one. So really happy with that one.
Great, and let's dive back in then to where we were before. So we're talking about your journey so far. You kind of went through a point where you're raising your kids, life's really demanding, you're working full time, things are not going very easily, and so you just stopped. And now we look at where you are today. You've had releases on a range of labels. I mean, I haven't even done your bio properly for this podcast, but you've had releases on Renaissance, Syncopat, Celador, Some Over Histories, Charm Records, and others, many labels, and you've had a lot coming out in the last couple of years. I mean, it seems like you're on an absolute productivity streak right now. So I would love to hear what changed. Big question, but
well, yeah, I think I wasn't feeling very fulfilled in life, and I think that people get a sense of fulfillment from growth, from developing as a person, but also creative pursuits. I think are essential, and maybe not for everybody, but I think they are. On some level, people I think people should create, right, on some level, and that was what was missing from my life. Around the 2016 time, it was a very bad time. My father died, there was Brexit, there was all of that kind of far right business going on, and I spent a lot of time arguing with people on social media. So I just had a moment, and this was in 2019 at the beginning of COVID, where I thought to myself, I've spent like 2 years or something just wasting time, engaging in spending a lot of time, waking up early in the morning so I could write a paragraph this long to possibly a Russian bot.
It's like the online trolls. Just disagreeing with that,
arguing about Sadiq Khan, something, trying to prove people, and it wasn't just me. There was a lot of people who got stuck in that. But then I just thought, what am I doing? This is completely stupid. I could invest this time into music production, and just go back into that. And I gave up drinking. I started eating a bit more healthy. I mean, I've got a bit of a sweet tooth, but I just cut out the alcohol. That made a big difference. Because I wasn't an alcoholic, but I was just drinking consistently, so you've always got it in your bloodstream, just a little bit of it going around, and your sleep's not as good. You can't make just everything about your life is worse when you've just got alcohol in your system the whole time.
Yeah, and actually we were speaking a little bit about this before we came on air on the show today. I mean, that would be interesting to hear about as well. You were saying that naturally you're not really the person who seeks the limelight. You're not really the person who wants to be the DJ waving their hands around, jumping around on the CDJs on the stage, and that I don't want to put words in your mouth and say, oh, you use alcohol as a coping mechanism, but you were saying that you did typically have a few drinks when you were playing, and obviously you kind of shot to success as well. Like, you didn't kind of, what am I trying to say? You got large bookings for big crowds, like you said, big festivals and stuff, based off your productions. So based
off one really. Got very high. So
you had a Beatport #1, and all of a sudden you're thrust in front of big crowds. That's a lot to handle if you're not the kind of person as well. If you're a little bit more on the introverted side, or you're just more comfortable in the studio than you are like on the stage.
And the bookings were very, very mixed as well. Like I said, I mean, there was some big things in, and always abroad. I had nothing in England. In the UK, you've got a kind of there's a hierarchy and a structure, and if you're not in that structure, you're just not part of the game. So in the UK, I was nobody, but some random places I would suddenly be quite a prestigious booking. Yeah, and it was all very strange. But I didn't particularly enjoy. I mean, sometimes I'd be in the right mood and there'd be that bi-directional exchange of energy, and you'd be right in the zone. When that unifying energy is there, sometimes it just happens. But I couldn't tap it. I couldn't just turn that on. You couldn't
switch it on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sometimes it would happen, but it doesn't. Yeah.
And really now I understand it's about tiredness, and it's about how you look after yourself, and you give yourself the biggest chance if you look after yourself. And I just wasn't looking after myself. So I'd arrive to the hotel room and it'd be like, okay, where's the mini bar? I'd get into the mini bar and I would drink everything that was in there.
Okay.
And I would pay that sometimes, and sometimes they'd pay it.
Yeah. Well, that's another question as well, of like the fact that it's super normal in the music industry for bookers to say, what's your rider? And then you show up and there's a bottle of vodka in the DJ booth and it's all just given to you for free. Like, I've made a habit recently of asking to have always some bottles of coconut water as well, or some non-alcoholic beers, because you want to drink something because you're thirsty and whatever. But if you drink a non-alcoholic beer or you drink some coconut water, then that like helps you measure it out. But it's hard when this stuff's literally being thrust on you for free as like a perk of your job. Here's a vodka, here's a whiskey, whatever.
Yeah, and it has a negative. And also on the plane, I'd be drinking those little mini bottles of whiskey and things like that. Essentially, I just wasn't happy doing that, I think. Yeah. And I know that just sounds so ungrateful, and I feel bad to say it, because I think it's a lot of people's dream to do that.
When you say doing that, you mean touring? You mean flying abroad and
playing gigs, and then and a lot of people have this thing of going to after parties with the view of networking and strategizing. I was going there to get off to try and escape from reality, right? Because my reality I wasn't really happy in. So there was just a number of areas of my life I wasn't happy in, and I was kind of just, everything was hiding from something, right? So the music was supposed to be the refuge from the rest of it, but I was kind of hiding in that situation as well, and I was uncomfortable talking to people at festivals and stuff, and I remember talking to another guy who was honest with me. I won't say his name, but he said to me, do you ever feel sometimes when you're in these situations that you're just looking to try and get out of the conversation that you're currently in and move on to and just get away or something? And I was like, yeah, I do. Yeah. Not always, but that does happen quite a bit, because you're expected to be sociable and stuff all the time, but it's people you've just, sometimes there's a really good bond and there's people, like-minded people, and you just connect. But unless you're on your game the whole time, your moods are different, right? And your tiredness levels are fluctuating.
I think it's totally natural also between like introversion, extroversion, and that sort of thing as well. But also, everybody's only human. So if it's your full-time job to be showing up and delivering like high energy DJ sets, and then you go to the after party where you're supposed to be high energy to have impactful conversations and make an impression on people that you meet that you don't even know, and you have the same conversation with 8 people about like where you're from, your background, like what you're doing. It's tiring. You're just human, Yeah.
And sometimes there's also an element of not dishonesty, when people, they're not really being themselves, and that can be tiring as well. There were some really great moments on that touring, but really I didn't do it properly. There's a way you should do that, and I think it's managing your timings of doing it. It's not doing it too much. It's having breaks. It's working out when you're going to do your studio. There was none of that for me. I needed someone. I'm the sort of person who needs a nanny or something to tell it. Well, back then I was. Now I would be able to do that. But I'm not in any great hurry to go and tour. I've had some offers, but they're not amazing offers, and it's just not worth really at the moment doing anything. I mean, I'm doing the Renaissance thing. That's a really good booking, a local one. And it's an early slot as well, just to sort of ease back into it. But
and remind us when that is.
That's November the 5th, fireworks night.
Yeah, is that in Brighton?
Brighton,
Did I see? Yeah. So, and that's alongside. Is that Henry Bergman?
Henry
playing
Bergman
as well?
is the headliner. It's a mix album that she's launching with Renaissance, and Nolan, who goes under various names, Cyberpunks, and he used to be Timo Garcia back in the days. He's playing after me, so it's me, then him, then Henry.
Yeah. And so do you feel like in general you're being a lot more selective about the bookings that you want to take now? Like your focus right now is really producing, it's carving out your sound. I mean, you're prolific right now in the amount of EPs and tracks you have coming out, and so that's great to see that you're really on your game with it. But you're not doing that with a means to an end of let me go back to Australia and play another big festival or anything like that.
No, and I've had some strange responses when I've said that, but at the minute that isn't my goal. My goal is I want to place more EPs. I want to get better at producing. I want to experiment outside of 4/4 a little bit at some point. Because when you're producing 4/4, a lot of the energy is taken up with that one drum that's playing the whole time. When you remove that, or you have a broken beat, or you have ambient or something, then there's a lot more. The palette is more, the canvas rather. There's more of it to put stuff on. So I am wanting to do more creation. I've sort of started working on another project with someone else. I wouldn't say ghost producing, it's collaborative.
Okay.
But they're learning.
Okay.
So there's that. I just wanted to try something different because I've turned down a lot of collaborations or just not been able to do them. And I thought I've got to try and put myself out of the comfort zone a little bit. Remember David Bowie who said that if you the best place to be is just a little bit further than what your comfort zone is.
Not too far, because then you're unhappy or you're stressed or whatever, but just a little bit on the outside, because then you're constantly growing. Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to do. But in terms of travelling, because that travelling business, it takes out a lot of time and it takes out a lot of, you're tired. There's no way to avoid that. Even if you get all your flights early, late checkouts, and it's just draining. Yeah, you're just not going to be able, and your production will suffer as a result of it, and your time. You don't have the focus. Yeah, don't have the focus. Yeah, so I'm really nervous about that. That's one of the procrastination points. I'm not a greedy person. I don't, I want to be comfortable, but I don't want to be. It's not my ambition to be a multi-millionaire. Yeah. So I can never match, Tale of Us and these guys who. They're so focused, and they have been since the start. Yeah. And they were really dedicated. Made a lot of sacrifices at the beginning, and stuck with it for the success. I'm very much committed to the music and the production, but this other stuff, I just haven't got that fire for it, But you said to me also before we came on there that one of the main drivers for you is that you want to make music that matters to you, as in you're much more focused on the doing, like the activity itself, and not the outcome of the activity, right? Which I think that's such a healthy and refreshing attitude, because it's not that common actually. Like speaking as another person working in the music industry, I find that a lot of people are very, very focused on the outcome, much more so even now than like 5 years ago. Or 10 years ago. I just think we're going way more in that direction, and I think social media exacerbates that. Yeah. People just care a lot about image and that sort of thing, which is all outcome focused. And I'm not saying Tale of Us is like that. I mean, obviously they've been in this game for a very long time, any big artists like that. And now they've reached a level where they're very successful. Yeah. And that wasn't necessarily their end goal. Like, they probably started with a love for making music. People loved it, and it's kind of organically turned into something where now they have like a team and a management and stuff. Yeah. But yeah. I mean, because of course, like we said, the brand and the socials are as important as the music now. I think that could water down some of the music, right? You have this kind of thing where you can, is it good enough? Yeah. Is it really breaking is it pushing any boundaries or doing anything really emotionally exciting? It doesn't have to. Or is it original? Is it new, or does it just sound like it sounds like a track, but it just sounds like any other track? And can I listen to this track and know which artist it's coming from, or does it just sound like any of those other thousands of releases? Yeah, and the mixing quality that people have these days is amazing. Like, the sounds are so polished. So that kind of, because there's two distinct things in production. They overlap in terms of when you're doing them, but they are totally different things, which are the creative bit and then the kind of the mixing and making it sound good bit. They're so,
I mean, you kind of do one when you're doing the other, but one is as complete right brain, left brain, which is the one that does the creative stuff.
I think left brain is creative.
Yeah, so it's that
or
one.
maybe right. I think
No,
you're
right brain is
right brain
creative.
is creative because it controls the left side of your body.
Yeah, I always get confused with that because I always think of right-wing people and left-wing people. But so the creative one, and this was the thing that Patrice Boymel revealed on that interview with Paul Nolan. Do you remember? Did you see that?
Yeah,
interview?
I've listened. Shout out to Make Your Transition.
There's so much gold in that interview, and I was going to talk to Paul Nolan by the end of the year about that, but he was talking about creative hours, and maybe this is obvious to other people, but it wasn't obvious to me. So I would be sitting there trying to produce music at 4:00 on a Sunday afternoon and just hating it, and nothing was happening, and I couldn't do anything good, and I just couldn't do anything sometimes. I was just sort of doing nothing.
Yeah.
Zero productivity. And then I realised I'm never creative at that time of day, but I am in the middle of the night. But I can't stay awake in the middle of the night, so what's the next best thing? Wake up really early in the morning. And that's what Patrice Boymel was doing. And I thought, what a strange idea, but I'm going to try that. So I just got up at like 5, and lo and behold, immediately, it's like stuff just seems to be easier at that time of day.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, I found that a little bit myself as well. I mean, obviously, I'm not really much of a producer yet, but just with DJing, and if I had to like make a podcast or something, if I felt really out of the flow, that sometimes 5-6 a.m. in the morning, it's the best time. Also because it's before you've given your energy to anything else or anyone else in the day. Like
so
you're fresh, like your cup of energy is full, and it's much easier.
Yeah, it's definitely that's that first thing of the day, and also with the still as well, because there's not anything else going on, and that just the focus it's just so much easier to achieve that full focus where there's just nothing else going on. So I turn the phone off.
Yeah.
Like, it's easy enough to stop browsers and things dinging, so there's nothing's going to stop pinging up and making you distracted.
Yeah.
Like it would on a Sunday afternoon or something. The dog is even my dog is sleeping.
Everyone's asleep. The children are asleep. The city's just everyone's asleep basically, and you just have the time, just you and your thoughts and.
So that's when you say what's changed, I think doing that was the biggest thing actually.
Okay, so you've just changed your whole routine. But again, like another thing to point out with that is that if you were still having a heavy DJ schedule, you'd be playing at like 4 or 5 in the morning, and it would be very difficult then to find those productive hours. So
and then when you're back,
you'll
be too tired. If you wake up on 2 hours sleep, that's no good. It has to be a proper night's sleep.
Exactly. So then you're playing on the weekend at 4 a.m. Then you're going to bed on a Tuesday night at 9 p.m. So you can get up at 4 a.m. and it's challenging to do both right now for sure.
And I guess on some level, I'm scared of losing that flow. Because it's giving me happiness as well,
which is arguably the most important thing.
Yeah,
really.
And then if I lose that, I probably won't. But I guess on some psychological level, I am afraid of that. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons I'm sort of, maybe next year I'll start going out there in a couple of months. Just procrastination, when you're just pushing it down the road because you. Yeah.
But I would say, I think in a second we'll jump back into your next tune, but I would say, I think, you're as I said, you're releasing prolifically right now on some really major labels, and I'm sure you're only going to be getting better and better over the next couple of years. You said you've got a lot more experimental projects coming up. It's likely that you may have the opportunity to pick and choose your bookings a fair amount, so you might not have to, go back into that touring mentality before where it's every weekend, but if it's once every 6 to 8 weeks and it's a great show, maybe that's like the best of both worlds, because then you can still communicate your music to people on the dance floor as well, which is a great experience.
And at the minute I am making mainly dance floor music, and I know it seems odd to people that you're making dance floor music but you're never going onto the dance floor. It's like, well, it's just I can put myself in that zone in the room when I'm recording it, and that's enough at the moment. So
you have to do what's inspiring you, like you have to do what's making you happy at the end of the day. Like that's much more important than traveling around the world being like what's successful on the outside but like feeling miserable. That's no good. But I think let's dive into your next track. Do you know what you were thinking to play next for us?
Yeah, I was going to play the other mix.
Let's have a look on this CDJ. Right, we will be back in a second with that next track, guys.
Live daily shows, 24/7 electronic music. Welcome to Loop London.
We're jumping back in again now, so we're about in the last 10 to 15 minutes of the show. If you've listened the whole way through so far, big shout out to you and thank you so much. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about this track, how you came to make it, etc.? Is it out yet?
No, it's not. This one, so the first one I played is coming out on Friday. This one's coming out a week Friday.
Okay.
They're spread out over 2 releases. And Matt's originals, he's done 4 originals, 2 of them on Friday, 2 of them the following Friday. Yeah,
okay. So. And these are all from the Renaissance
all from the Renaissance package, yeah.
Cool. And how long did it take you to work on this? Like, I'm curious because that's something. Some people say, I make a track in 3 hours. Some people spend 2-3 weeks or ages, and revisit it a lot.
Yeah, I think I've had this conversation with a lot of producers. My process, it is quick. I mean, I get the initial idea down in one. I get to that point where you've got like 2 blocks of 16 or something in the arrangement window that you really love, and you're sure about, and you can feel a full track coming out of it. And I'll do that in one morning.
Okay.
And if that happens super quickly, I'll also arrange that into a full track that same morning over like 3 hours, 4 hours. But sometimes I'll come back the following day for another 3-4 hours, arrange it and mix it. So it's normally 2 sessions like that, maybe a total of 8 hours. But then after that, there's a period of mixing and trying to get it to sound good that can go on like forever.
So it's like the 80% of the track is done really quickly, and then it's the final 20%. It's like the finessing that takes a while. Yeah,
and that is so important, that finessing as well. I used to skip on that. That's a piece of advice I'd give to producers, is to not skip that. Because I used to just get so excited about the basic idea that it's like, oh yeah, this is ready, ship it.
Yeah.
But then then when you hear it in a club, it's like, oh my god, this doesn't stand up because the bass doesn't sound right, and there's all these muddy, like nasty frequencies, and the high end's not right. And you try and EQ your way out of it on the mixer, and all it would have required is just like a proper focused mixing session, with some reference tracks, 2 or 3 or 4 reference tracks in the same ballpark. and just get it sounding, and that makes so much difference to the quality of the record.
Yeah, and I'm sure if anything, it's even more relevant today than like in the last 5-10 years, because we're seeing so much audio technology is really advanced now, and so like you really need to produce tracks that are built for these massive sound systems in super clubs and festivals that we see these days. And you said that's a bit of advice you'd give to other young producers. I mean, we say young producers, anyone, like there's no age on learning to produce, but anyone who's like kind of making their first steps in producing, or anyone who's been producing for a while but is hitting kind of roadblocks and stuff. Obviously you're kind of a success story of someone who's been doing this for a while and has hit a few bumps in the road and had to come back and is now finding it. You've really found your flow. So we've talked about finding the hour that works well for you, and for you that's like the early hours of the morning, 5-6 a.m. What other things? We've talked about cutting out alcohol, healthy lifestyle, but is there anything else that you want to talk about?
Yeah, definitely. There's the other thing is it doesn't there's periods where it doesn't flow as well as other times, and I've analysed this over the last like 2 years when I've done it every day, almost every single day for the last 2 years. I've had the same routine, same production routine, and I'm so excited when I go to bed, and I'm so excited about what's going to happen when I wake up. But there are some periods where, and they last maybe a week, and they come every like 3 or 4 months where you just like, you don't feel the same. It's like a little bit like, it's an effort, and this doesn't sound very good, there's no point. But then it's so important with those tracks to finish them and put that effort into the mixing and everything, so you just get the practice. And then always at the end of that phase, that sort of slightly down phase, when you come back up, it always feels higher than the previous point. So sticking it out in those moments is just like absolutely the most important thing, I would think.
So you're saying don't give up, or like don't be like, I'm off colour this week, so I'm just not going to do my work. Just go through the motions, even if you're not feeling it, because it's kind of like you're keeping that consistency, and and then you don't fall out, and then you kind of probably get back to your flow more quickly.
Absolutely, yeah. Because if I think that if you don't do it, then when you come back, you've still got to get rid of that crap that was that you haven't got out of the system. Yeah, that's how it seemed anyway. And what I've got to a point now where that will happen. I know I'm probably due another one in like within a month or something, but then within 2 or 3 days of making track, and even those tracks, sometimes there's something salvageable in those tracks. They don't excite you as much. That's the thing, when you don't feel quite as excited as other times. But most of the time, like I would say 80, probably more, 90% of the mornings I have felt fine. It's just that when you get those those moments of doubt or something, just carry on. That's the biggest advice I would give.
I love that. I think that's really useful advice, actually, because I think it's very easy in any creative project to kind of say, I'm finding it hard today, but like I'm going to just stop doing it and I'll come back to it when I feel like it. But that could be another reason why you're checking out releases. Like you've just got a lot going on, like because you are maintaining that consistency, and you're able to say, well, I'm having an off week, not I'm a terrible producer right now. Or like I've lost my touch,
Yeah, because it's easy because that's what I thought back in 2017, 18. I thought, I just can't do it anymore, and I'm never going to be able to do it, so I just stopped. But then if you just keep doing it, the quantity delivers the quality in the end, because you make 10 records, there's going to be one that's better than all the others.
Exactly.
And then sometimes when you're in those bad phases, or when I'm in those bad phases, everything doesn't sound good. But then when you come back to it later, then suddenly like one of them is like, you think, it's not just good, this is amazing, I can make something really good out of this. Yeah. So just keep going. That's so important, because there's something better at the end of that kind of slightly miserable short period, and it's always short as well if you keep working.
And I think that's also only natural, because we're all only human, we're not machines. You can't expect yourself to deliver perfection all the time, and it's very hard when you're an artist, if that's your job or it's your profession or your calling or whatever, when you're making these tracks, to expect yourself to always deliver something that's excellent when you're also trying to be experimental, and you're trying to push boundaries, you're trying to try new things. It's not going to be perfect every time. Yeah,
that's a difficult one, because there was always this thing, particularly when you're not doing it all the time when you are in the studio, you feel like this pressure that it's got to be an absolute monster of a record. It's got to be like something that's going to challenge the one that's number one. And then you start thinking about, because Maceo Plex can't also do what Eric Price does. Eric Price can't do what, I don't know, some other big guy does. But it's easy to get into that mindset where you think, well, it doesn't sound as good as his latest record. It doesn't sound as good as his latest record. Forget all that. Just shut all that off. And just keep doing whatever it is, whatever the idea is, whether it's a big sounding track or a not big sounding track. Just get into it and do it to the best you can, right to the end. All of the whole process, including the mixing and the kind of little attempt at mastering it. And that way you just get better. I'm absolutely 100% convinced that that's the best way to go about it. Just keep doing it.
And that's also kind of part of a growth mindset as well. It's about saying, well, you know, even if this track that I've spent 10 hours working on, it's not going to be a number one on Beatport, but like I've still learned something from this, and I can take away something from it. Like maybe I figured out how to configure this weird reverb on this drum snare or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like you take
you've
something,
practiced the process, and you've got through, and that's the only way you get better. A lot of people don't get better at that last bit because they never do it. They never get to it because they cave in. Like when they arrange the track and it doesn't excite them at that moment.
They just say, "Oh, throw this one on the scrap."
Yeah. So stuff gets trashed, and I've done it. I mean, that track Beholden, the one that got really big, the one that Tale of Us were playing.
I saw this video on your Instagram, and they were playing. Was they playing it in Tulum? Was it?
They played
Tulum?
it all. There's the one with the palm trees. Which is the first one. When I saw it, I thought, Jesus Christ, are these Tale? Because I didn't know how big they were.
Yeah, I mean they've really blown up in the last sort of 6, 7, 8 years as well. They've gone, meteoric.
When I was paying attention in 2012 or something. They were just the same as the Oliver Koletsky and all of those, that Berlin. They were like a part of that Berlin group. Who also, around that time, one of the reasons I gave up is because suddenly all these people became amazing at producing very suddenly. Do you remember that?
It was a little bit before my time. I was listening to dance music at this point, but like I only really got into dance music around say 2010. Okay,
right.
So when I got into dance music, these guys were already like, okay, these are quite big. But their sound has changed a lot, and obviously Afterlife has changed a lot. Back then, Life and Death was really big. DJ Tennis and that sound, and that was kind of reigning over what everyone was doing. And like I think since 2012, 2014, Afterlife have kind of distinguished themselves from people, and now obviously that's huge.
But there was a lot of improvement in the production quality, and while at the same time I was going down, because the vinyl days, the production quality wasn't that good. The ideas were great, but the songs all sound awful. And then we put stuff on vinyl. Everyone loved vinyl, but you put stuff on vinyl, you lose everything over like 7,000 hertz. It just sort of just goes all crunchy and horrible. And things just don't sound as good. I know people love it, but the crackling is nice. But the general,
the overall in a big club, it's nice in like a small bar maybe, but in a massive club and a huge sound system, you're losing a lot of the quality of the files. Yeah. All right. In the essence of time, I think we had like one more track that you wanted to play. Is that the case? So do you want to just tell us who this is by?
So this is the risk of sounding like I'm putting too much music out. I've got the 2 Renaissance ones, one week after another, but then the week after the second one of those, there's another one for Dean Ox and Beckers called Control. It's coming out on Mango Alley.
When's this coming out?
So this is 3 weeks on Friday.
We are in October now, November, sort of like mid-November, we could say.
Sometime
on Mango Alley. Okay, we'll keep our eyes peeled for it. Great. Well, let's have a listen to this. We can jump back in a second and say bye to everyone. So we are almost at the end of the show now. Thank you so much for everyone who's tuned in. If anyone has any questions for James or anything like that, you'll be able to reach out either to me on Instagram. I assume most of you have my Instagram, is Redfreya DJ, or James Harcout. I think do you want to say what your Instagram is, James Harcout?
Instagram is James Harcout 74.
And SoundCloud is also, you can find that from just on SoundCloud or just via your Instagram as well. Very accessible, and you've got all your releases up there and upcoming stuff. So I'd really recommend, if anybody has enjoyed hearing this chat, but also enjoyed hearing the tracks, I really recommend if you go and give him a follow on Instagram, check him out. It's been so great having you on today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to share about what's coming next. Obviously, you've got that gig on the 5th in Brighton.
Yes, playing in Brighton on the
people.
5th. Yeah, early one. So yeah, if you're going to come along, get there early. It's the Water Bear that used to be called the Funky Buddha back in the day.
Okay.
It's quite a cool club actually, but it's a very narrow, it's like an archy sort of. Yeah, it's a cool club.
I've actually never been clubbing in Brighton, so you're based mostly in Brighton at the moment. Is that right?
I live just outside Brighton.
Yeah. And then after that, anything else on the horizon, or any other releases coming out later in the year, or are you just going to be digging into the winter focus?
There's a lot of stuff coming out actually. Yeah, I did a ton of remixes this year. So there's that Dinox and Becca's one and the 2 Renaissance ones.
Mm-hmm.
Then after that, there's another Salador one, a remix of an Argentinian guy, Folga, who put out a vocal track on the last Salador showcase. So that one's coming on, I think, December the 5th. And then there's one more for Dear Dear for Rafael Serrato.
Nice, yeah. Big fan of him.
With Sea Line. That's quite a banger of a track. And then in the new year, there's my favourite of all of these remixes is the one for Babetta's Lonely Planet Boy. I love that song anyway.
Yeah.
And I did a version of that. I did 2, but there's one in particular that hopefully is coming out, I think, in the new year. There's more, but I'll just stop there.
Yeah, I mean that's great to hear that you've got so much lined up in the pipeline as well. And yeah, I'm a big fan of Babetta and Rafael Serrato, so really, really cool. So definitely go give James a follow on SoundCloud, check out his mixes, have a read of his interview and listen to the podcast he's done for Balance Series as well. We will be back here, I think, next week, next Tuesday. Actually, next Tuesday it's the 2-year anniversary of the radio show, so it's going to be me back on the decks, first time in a couple of months. Next Tuesday, 7 p.m. Hopefully we'll see you then. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening. This has been Bloop Radio London.
Bloop, London.